Well, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our session, How to Navigate the Workplace as a Young Professional, which will be led by women of the Auburn Alumni Association's Young Alumni Council. For this session, we will have 5 inspiring young alumni who will share what their experience looked like entering the workplace, specifically as a young woman. Throughout this panel, we will talk about their experiences navigating the workplace, as well as what they hope to pass on to the next group of young women as they begin their careers. As a reminder, you are automatically muted, but you can put your questions and comments in the group chat, and we will get to as many at the end of the session as time allows. Joining us today, we have Olivia Bradford, Jacqueline Chandler, Rodmesia Clark, Jennifer Geeker, and Natalie Walker. As we kick things off, I would like for each panel member to provide an introduction as well as what their current career role is, and then we will jump into some questions. If you're interested in learning more about these incredible ladies, their full bios can be found on our website. We will start off with the wonderful Olivia Bradford. Take it away, Olivia.
Good morning, everyone, and a big War Eagle. We are also excited to be a part of this conversation with each of you today, and so we're just excited to be a part of the Auburn family, being Auburn women in the Auburn family. So I'm Olivia Bradford. I graduated from Auburn University in 2012 with a degree in public relations, and have navigated kind of all the different facets of public relations in my career since then. I currently am the Director of Communications and Events for the Shoals Chamber of Commerce in the Shoals of Alabama.
Thank you, Olivia. Jacqueline?
Hey guys, War Eagle. Thank you, Caroline, and to the whole Auburn Alumni Association for all your hard work to make this summit happen, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of it. I went to Auburn, obviously graduated in 2018. First job was actually in the city of Auburn doing economic development for the city, which was such a blessing. But my husband and I now reside in Birmingham, where I'm the Vice President of Business Development for a commercial advisory firm called Nexite.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Rodmesia?
Hey, good morning, everyone. War Eagle. My name is Rodmesia Clark. I graduated from Auburn in 2008 in the chemical engineering department. My current job is actually I'm transitioning. I start on a new job on Monday, which is the Chief of Staff and Strategic Lead for the VP at Schneider Electric. So really great to be here and speak with you guys today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Rodmesia, and we're so excited for your new role, and we can't wait to hear more about it. Jen?
Hey everyone, I am Jen Beaker. I graduated from Auburn in 2016 from the College of Business. I also got a minor in nonprofit and employment studies. So I currently live in Miami, but I work for Washington and Lee University as the Assistant Director of Young Alumni Philanthropy. So I'll talk about past roles when we get into this, but I essentially work in the nonprofit sector and work with fundraising.
Thank you, Jen. And last but not least, Natalie.
Hey everyone, Natalie Walker here. I graduated in 2016 with a degree in supply chain management from the College of Business. I currently work in finance at Facebook, which has been really cool. Started that job last year, so excited to kind of talk about navigating to that new role amidst the pandemic and those sorts of things. So excited to be here as well today.
Thank you, Natalie. Well, thank you, ladies, for the wonderful introductions. And with that being said, let's dive into some questions regarding what your experience entering the workplace looked like. So I will kick it off with, can you kind of tell us what your first job was and what the transition of undergrad to working full-time looked like? And what was one of the biggest lessons you learned in your first professional role? And I will start with Miss Jen Beaker.
Fabulous. So my first job was as an account manager, and it was for a small startup, which was not something that I was at all on my radar, but it was a good opportunity at the time. So there were a lot of lessons learned. I think working at a startup has its own bag of challenges that comes with it. But the position I held, I was the first account manager there. So I guess the lesson learned was when you see opportunity, take it. The position was a little disorganized because, again, it was new. And so it was kind of easy to find all these simple solutions and just ways to streamline it, make it more organized. But in my first role, I guess I wasn't quite as confident stating like, well, this is what should be happening, or why aren't we doing it this way? So I kind of grew into that as time went on, but don't be afraid to do that in your first job. I think that really was number one lesson. I saw a lot of opportunity and capitalized on some, should have capitalized on more. So yeah, if it's your first role, you're allowed to work, you're allowed to do your job. They hired you to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. Jacqueline?
Hey guys, so my kind of journey when I graduated college was a little different. I thought that I was going to grad school right off the bat, but had gotten engaged, and as life has it, nothing ever works out according to planned. But I actually did an internship the summer after my senior year of college. But during my time at Auburn, I had served as SGA president and had been very involved in SGA, and therefore did not have a ton of internships because I had kind of poured out my summers and falls and springs all to Auburn, which is awesome. But that kind of led me to intern after I graduated. And then that internship led into what I thought was going to be a temporary part-time job working for the city of Auburn's Economic Development Department as a way to transition to Birmingham. So I worked in economic development, and a lot of jobs were based around public sector fiscal years. And so, I had graduated in May and jobs weren't opening until November after kind of that October 1 start date. So I kind of had some intermittent time, and that actually turned into a crazy good job opportunity to stay at Auburn and be the director of industrial development. And so in that role, I recruited national and international company manufacturing operations and companies to Auburn, and also retained our 49 manufacturing operations within the city of Auburn, with 29 of those being international. So that was a really cool role. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from that is just being present where your feet are planted. Because had I looked at my, part-time temporary opportunity as just that and hadn't poured into it, it never would have turned into the job that was a dream job at the time. And so as much as you want to hop to the next thing or have your future be certain, there's just always an opportunity to grow where you're planted. And you just quite never know what's going to come after that. So I guess my advice from that would just be give your all where you're at, because doors will open.
Absolutely. Olivia?
So just to echo similar sentiments from both Jen and Jacqueline, a little different. My first job right out of college was actually at the Walt Disney Company. So it never really felt like a job, but it was a lot of fun. But I had a 6-month contract. So once that finished, I knew I was ready to actually enter into the workforce. So my first, I guess you could say, real job was a part-time tour guide at the Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville. And I was just desperate at that point to get into the entertainment industry in Nashville in any way that I could. And so I took the job, and I am a type 3, type A OCD kind of personality. And so with anything, I'm like, give it to me and let me run with it. And so I very quickly just tried to get in there, learn as much as I could about the building, about the history, so that not only was I good as a tour guide and enhancing the experience that guests and tourists were feeling when they came to the Ryman, but also looking at all the different processes and procedures and did it make sense? Were what we were doing, was that the best use of our time? Did it, the layout, the flow, everything that had been worked in, had it ever really been analyzed and thought through from a customer experience standpoint? And so it was a lot of fun. I only stayed there a few months because the administration saw my drive and my willingness to show up every single morning with a smile on my face, even though I was a part-time tour guide. And so I very quickly moved up into the administrative realm of the Ryman, which was exactly and more what I could have ever hoped for. So I guess my takeaway from that is very similar to Jacqueline's, just to give it your all, because you never know who's watching you. So it may not be your ideal job. It may not be the dream job when you're coming right out of college. But if you're showing up every single morning, you're giving it 110%. You are, the one who's in a meeting and says, no, I can do that. Like, let me help. I want to learn more. I want to be a sponge. I want to do that. And throwing yourself into every single opportunity, then you will be noticed. And so just to, like I said, show up. That's the most important thing. Show up, be present, and to do your best. And I think Auburn really prepares you for that, because Auburn has, we have such a instilled bit of, I don't want to say the word pride, but for lack of a better word, pride, that, we are representing the Auburn family. We're representing, our Auburn diploma. And so we want to put our best foot forward, and it's really going to carry you a long way.
Absolutely. And what great advice to give to young women. Rodneycia?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a unique experience coming out of undergrad from Auburn. So my first job out of school was as a process engineer working offshore for BP America. I supported a number of different drilling and production platforms as a chemical engineer. So very unique experience in that. Got to fly on a helicopter, had never done that before, work offshore and live out there for some weeks at a time. So very unique. After a while though, I decided to go back to grad school because it just, I always knew I wanted to be in leadership. I always knew I wanted to be in management. And unlike, Jacqueline and going straight to, and Jen going to the grad school route, probably right out of school, I decided to take a little bit more of a path and going to work first and then going to grad school. So I think my initial lessons learned experience is to don't be afraid to change. We sometimes we land our dream jobs right first out of college, sometimes we don't. Whether it's the dream job or not, I don't think you can't be afraid to navigate to what feels like the next right step for you, whether that's another job or whether that's grad school or whether that's taking a sabbatical and not working and going to explore. We have to understand that the choice that you make right out of school is the choice given what you know at that moment and what your life circumstances are at that moment. And as those things change, your choices will change. And so for me, the lesson learned was, don't be afraid to change. We go to school and we work hard and we get these degrees and we think that our first job is the only job, and it's not. There are going to be multiple opportunities after that. And so I learned that very early in my career that, navigating and adjusting and changing, it's okay.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the most fun you can have is during that changing period. So thank you for sharing that with us. Natalie?
Yeah, so many great points that everyone's bringing up. I could relate to so many of your stories. I think similar to Jacqueline, I poured a lot of my time into Auburn while I was there, involved in really a bunch of different student organizations. So I didn't get to do an internship until my senior year. I was like graduating, but it was a requirement for my degree. So it's like March, April, pretty late. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I still haven't gotten an internship. Freaking out just a little bit, and just networking on campus allowed me to find and land like the perfect internship. My background being in supply chain, I was like, man, I'm going to be in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere, like not the most glamorous place to start out, but that's where you start, right? Ended up networking with a woman named Kim Evans. She was our women's golf coach at Auburn for like a number of years. Saw her in the first semester of the year. I worked at the rec center. She came and spoke just to all the staff there. Fast forward to the next semester. It was a women's event very similar to this. And I saw her again. I was like, hey, you spoke at the rec center. I'm a note taker. So I had notes on my phone about what she talked about. So I was able to really like say like, hey, you talked about this and this. And she was like, send me your resume. And she actually passed my resume to the vice president of finance at Cox Enterprises in Atlanta. So I was able to land an internship there and really work that into a full-time role post-graduation, which I never really saw myself starting out in a finance, very corporate environment. And just reflecting on that, preparing for this, my mom was actually a self-taught accountant. Back when you could do that. Now you have to have, a degree and credentials to get into accounting. But really, she instilled a lot of the like kind of core foundation and knowledge that I have of finance, as well as like my Auburn degree. But I started out there. So I just want to encourage any students that are maybe still trying to figure out what's next or where do I go, that, the right opportunity will come, and maybe it won't be when you want it, but there will be an opportunity that will open up. And don't let imposter syndrome, it's like this concept of, maybe I'm not good enough. Why am I here? Like there are all these people, maybe you're the only woman in the room, you were brought to that company or that team for a reason. So, speak up, as some of the other ladies have said, and, take pride in that Auburn education. And it's kind of a privilege that we've gotten to have such a good education and these experiences. So they brought you on to share it. So do that. Yeah, those are my thoughts around that question.
That was so perfectly said, Natalie. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you all for sharing kind of what your first role looked like. And as we kind of take that look back, I think, what has been one of the biggest highlights of your career as a young professional? Olivia?
Absolutely. I would say, and this is a bit of a segue into a different question, so I won't stray too far down this path, but I think one of the biggest hurdles that I had to overcome on my path as a young professional was overcoming this mentality that once you land somewhere, you stay there until you retire. And so, like I said, I won't talk too much on that, but I think that is a testament to what one of my biggest highlights is of my career. I have thoroughly enjoyed looking back and seeing every single step that I've taken in my career, because I was such a kind of a go-getter, for lack of a better term. Like I wanted to learn more and to grow constantly. And so I think one of the biggest highlights of my career was being able to use that personality characteristic and implement it into kind of that what's next mentality. I think the what's next mentality can take a bit of a toxic turn at times, just if you're not really finding content where you're at. But also I think that for some people, it's a growth perspective. And so where can I continue to grow? And it may be in your role that you're in. It may be in a different role in the same company, and it may be a different company altogether. One of the best positions that I've been able to hold was at the Country Music Hall of Fame. And I was over guest relations there. It was a blast. It was, there was constantly events going on, people coming in, just getting to interact with people from all around the world. And I think that was really one of the biggest moments in my life that exposed me to different cultures. And I think that has really helped me now moving back to a smaller town than Nashville, because my husband and I have experienced what it's like to work with and to live with and to, be in community with other cultures and other people and other demographics. And it's really a strength that we've been able to bring back to our community here in the Shoals. So I would think that that's probably my biggest highlight, is just being able to experience more of the world within a single job.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm very looking forward to seeing what you do with the Shoals Chamber. Natalie?
Yeah, I would say for me, one of my biggest, career highlights, I'll talk about two different things. One was just kind of landing a new job amidst the pandemic. I wasn't necessarily looking for a change, but I was open to the opportunity. When the recruiters reached out, talked about it, and kind of took a leap of faith amidst the pandemic. They couldn't tell me when I would need to relocate and all of those different things. But it was kind of a really cool, I think, experience for me, and let me know that, like, hey, there's so much more, and kind of similar to what Olivia's been saying, it's so much more than what you think of in that present moment and that current opportunity. And it's really important to kind of diversify your experiences. early in your career so that you can have more of a broad understanding of, whether it's business, finance, healthcare, whatever field you're in. So I think that's really important. And probably my second big accomplishment that I was pretty proud of was learning to really negotiate contracts. I was like, I didn't go to school for law, but it was a part of my role at my last company, just being able to pick out like business terms versus the legal terms, and really being able to help the different stakeholders and teams when they're purchasing new things. So I had a really big savings. I think it was almost like $3 million just working with my team. And that was a big highlight at my last company for me.
Absolutely. How awesome to learn something just by doing it. That's so incredible. So kind of with that, what is something that you are really looking forward to in your future, in your career, and kind of what you hope to achieve? And I will kick it over to Jen.
So I am probably most excited just to continue helping people. And I know that sounds really basic, but again, I work in nonprofits and it's what I want to do. And I think that Auburn really prepared me for a life of service. Everywhere you look, there's people around you who also want to change the world. There's volunteer opportunities, volunteer organizations. So I didn't think that I could make a career out of it. I just didn't know that I could. And I found the Intro to Nonprofits class at the College of Human Sciences and took that, and it just opened a whole new world for me. Like I mentioned earlier, I ended up graduating with a business degree, but with the intent of working for nonprofits. And so just having Auburn build me up for that and just solidifying that I can do this for a living has been really awesome. And so all that to say, I'm excited to just kind of leave a mark on this world and make it better and hopefully leave a legacy that my family will be proud of.
And we know you will, so we're excited to see that. Rodneycia?
Yeah, so for me, I think I'm excited about the possibilities. I've had the opportunity since leaving Auburn 12, 13 years ago to have a number of different roles very early in my career. One of the things I think it's taught me is that the possibilities are endless. Growing up, my mom used to say that the sky is the limit. And I as a kid, I'd be like, oh no, Mom, yeah, you know how we can be with Mom sometimes, like, Mom, you don't know what we're talking about. But as I've kind of navigated and ventured through my career, the possibilities really are endless. And you really can do whatever you want to do and whatever you put your mind to. And so for me, I'm just looking forward to all the things that God has in store for me that I haven't yet reached yet. And so, as advice for young women is if there's something that you want, to go after it. And so for me, I think that's probably the biggest things, the things the boxes I haven't yet checked, or the boxes I don't even know that exist that are boxes for this journey.
Absolutely. So a question for the full panel is, with graduation right around the corner, what is one piece of advice that you wish you would have received before entering the workplace, especially as a young woman? And I will start off with Jacqueline.
Thank you for that question. I think after being in the workplace, if I could go back and say what would be like the top 3 things that I wish somebody would have told me to focus on, that's kind of general, right? Because everybody's job is different, whether you're an engineering major, accounting major. I was an economics major, then you have, all the sciences that's just over my head and the doctors. But what are 3 things that kind of transcend every type of career? And I think one of those is being a really good listener. When you go into a new job, especially your first job, you might not understand all the dynamics at play. And so in any office, in any clinic, in any hospital, or whatever it is, there's personalities, there's history, there's a lot. And listening instead of speaking first is really, really important. It really sets you up for success. And from all that listening, I think the second thing would be to ask really thoughtful questions, and really kind of assume nothing. Because what you see might not always be what is really happening, and there might be things behind the scenes. And so just being able to ask thoughtful questions, and also too about processes. I think that a lot of times we think that making a statement shows our intelligence, but really being able to understand what's going on and ask a deep question about why does it work this way? Or I noticed X, Y, and Z. Is that how we get to this? Those questions actually pose your intelligence much more than making a statement. And being young, it's hard to make a statement. And I know that we so want to. And my Myers-Briggs says that I want to make a statement all day, every day. But sometimes if you do it, it kind of makes you look silly if you don't understand everything that's happening. And the last thing is like asking for opportunities and kind of carving out what you think your role is, because sometimes people see more in you than you see in yourself, which is awesome. But on the flip side, you can also be working in a really busy environment where people might not understand fully your skill set. And so feel free to be like, hey, I've been doing X, Y, and Z, would love the opportunity to help with this. And to always kind of have a helpful spirit at work is really important. So those are kind of my three.
Well, thank you for sharing those. Natalie?
Yeah, I would say, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, like trying to maybe diversify your experiences early. Don't get complacent and like, oh, this is my first job, or get kind of trapped into what you're doing and being so laser focused that you don't see what's going on around you. I feel like in a little bit, I did that at my first role, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how did my boss let me stay here? There's so much more like after leaving the company that I could be doing with my degree and with my knowledge and expertise. So that's one kind of piece of advice I would say, like do what you're doing, do it well, but also don't be blindsided and not looking at other opportunities that may be available. And maybe one other thing, at least that I'm looking forward to as a part of that, is being able to travel one day is one of my goals. And whether it be for work or personal, I think it really helps us to be better like thought leaders and thinking more about like cultural sensitivities that could be at play in the different environments that we're in. So I think that's another piece that's kind of really important about going into the workforce and just having a well-rounded maybe mindset.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. Olivia?
I would just like to keep it simple and say stay humble. No matter where you're at, what opportunities you're given, stay humble and do everything well. Every step you take, every decision you make, every statement that you put out there is a representation of yourself. And everything you do is your brand. And so whether it's personal or professional, it's always a reflection back on your character. And so just keeping that in mind when you're in the workplace, there's definitely a strength with humility that I think people kind of overlook at times because there's a difference between being weak and being humble. And for women especially, I think that that's a really important distinction to be able to have, is to know when it's weakness and when it's humility, because you can walk into a room and not say anything within a meeting, and it doesn't mean that you didn't have anything to say, like Jacqueline is saying, but it's more that you're internalizing and that you're making sure that you're ready to step foot into the statement, the meeting, the opportunity, whatever it is. So just anything that you're doing, like I said, do it well. It's your brand, it's you. No one else is going to be able to detract from the brand that you're creating for yourself in the workplace. And so just stay humble and do everything well.
Thank you for sharing that. What a powerful message. And it's really something that we all need to think through. So thank you for sharing that. Rodnesia?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a cue from Jacqueline and probably just try to distill this down to three things, because there's a lot I could probably share. I could probably talk an hour myself on just this topic. So if there are three things that I, graduating from college, that I wish someone had told me, number one, stay true to yourself. Authenticity is really, really important. There's a lot of pressure within social media, society, in the media, in telling women who they are, what they should be, and what they need to be doing at various points in their life. So for me, authenticity is a really big deal in finding your own voice and crafting and creating that. And and just leading the life that God has placed you on earth to leave and not nobody else's. So I think that's number one. Number two, a couple other women mentioned this, exploration. Similar to my first point, I think we're so caught up in, I need to have this job by 25, I need to get married by 30, I need to do these things. And so we don't give ourselves space to be childlike, not childish, but childlike to explore. The world is your oyster, and there's a ton of different opportunities and experiences out there. And exploration, as Natalie mentioned, does make you a well-rounded person, and it makes you interesting. And so I would challenge people to spend more time exploring and not figuring out how I need to go from this point to this point to this point in 10 years. So that's something I wish someone had told me. And somebody else mentioned this one too, a couple ladies actually, is number three, do a good job at the job that you're at currently. We oftentimes are always looking for the next opportunity, and we fail to do an excellent job at the job that you're already in. If you do an exceptional job at the job that you're in, people will seek you out. Your name will become known, and that next opportunity, you may not have to search for, it may find you. So do a really good job at whatever that is, be it the part-time worker at the Ryman, be it at the Cox, be it at Auburn, be it at the engineer, whatever it is, just do an excellent job at that. And that will become your opportunity for your next step.
Definitely. Last but not least, Jen.
This really was hard to boil down to a concise answer. But a piece of advice that I did get and did not heed was to network. I feel like that's a very broad term and can kind of seem overwhelming, but I just had this mentality of I can get this job on my own. I don't need to reach out to these folks over here. But you can only help yourself by reaching out to those people who want to help you. So I had family offering to help me, and of course people from Auburn. And so just take advantage of that. The alumni network wants to help you. We're family. If you send me an email, I'm going to respond as soon as I see it because I'm excited and I want to help you. I want to answer your questions. If I have an internship, I'd love to give it to you. So just don't be afraid to do that. And I think I was afraid because I didn't want to come across as a burden. But sending someone that email, that's not a burden. Just do it, and you never know what opportunities will come from that. And then kind of similar to the making sure you're asking thoughtful questions, don't stop learning. You get your degree, but that doesn't mean you know it all. You know a lot, and like Natalie said, Auburn sets you up for success. You have an advantage here, but don't stop. Keep going to webinars, keep listening to podcasts, keep reading, and asking those questions is a really good way to learn too. Again, it doesn't take away from what you do know, but there's no point in stopping there. You're just going to continue to set yourself up for success if you keep learning. And kind of in the same vein, when you're making decisions at work, have a very intentional reason for that, because again, that helps you learn. If I'm designing a graphic and choose to make something purple instead of blue, I should know why I did that, just to help guide those further decisions and just kind of refine your skill set. And again, just helps you to continue learning and adding to your knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for sharing that advice and your stories and personal experiences. I know if any students are tuning into the panel, that will be so helpful as they kind of navigate what life after Auburn looks like. So a question that we had was, when you are faced with a difficult decision or conflict, how do you navigate through that problem specifically in the workplace? And I will start off with you, Natalie.
Yeah, sure. I'll share a little bit kind of in general, and then I'll share an experience that I had and maybe having to make a difficult decision and maybe didn't handle it the right way. Maybe someone can learn from it. But just don't underestimate the power of proper and concise communication and escalation when you need to. There are people around you to support you in your job and your role. And so use them when possible. And having a really good relationship with your manager, your boss will really help you to know when to do that and how to do it in the most effective manner. I was working one of my first big projects. It was a renewal for a software that loaded different videos and content into our learning management system for the company. And it was kind of end of the year. No one was in the office to answer questions or sign off on the agreements. And I sent an email to my stakeholders, my key stakeholders, like, hey, this is what's going to happen if we don't renew by, December 31st. But didn't realize all of the implications, didn't ask those right questions that some of the people were mentioning. And so on January, I think 3rd or 4th, executives are getting back in the building, and then none of the videos are loading in the learning management system. And people are like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I sent this email, but did I escalate appropriately to the right people? Probably not. It wasn't like a bad thing. Like I didn't get like a huge slap on the wrist or anything, but like my team supporting me, they're like, hey, you tried to communicate it, and then let's talk about how do we correct it in the future and make sure that you have the tools that you need when it gets to kind of the year-end close and we have contracts that need to be renewed. And that's kind of one difficult kind of decision or conflict that I had to manage. There are tons of other things that may come up, whether it's maybe there's an off-color comment or something that may come up in a meeting, or maybe you're the only woman in the room and no one else is listening to your opinion or your thoughts that you're trying to get across. I think it's important to like advocate for yourself, speak up when you're in those situations and call people on it. Maybe you're not as comfortable maybe the first time calling it out in the meeting when you see it, but I think it's important to even pull maybe that person aside and talk to them about it. And certain companies have that culture and environment where it's safe to do that. Maybe there are learning videos and things like that. Maybe your company doesn't have that. Like be the person to reach out to HR and say, hey, we could have certain programs or courses like managing biases that could help all of us have a better, working environment. My company does a really great job at that, but that would be something I think that could help in very different environments as well.
Absolutely. And knowing when to speak up and using your voice is so important. So thank you for sharing that. Jacqueline?
Now, I love everything that you just said. And I think it's important to understand what you do within the context of your company. Like you can send an email, but if it's your responsibility, it's important to escalate those things. And that's just something you don't think about until you experience it. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to kind of go down the path of working with people. I could be wrong, but I'm saying like 98% of problems come from the people you work with, and not to anybody's fault, but just because we're humans. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And yeah, and that's kind of that. I think the biggest thing is, and depending on the environment you're in, my biggest piece of advice, like if you have a problem, like go to that person. Like do not waste your breath, do not waste your time, do not waste anybody else's time just complaining. Because I think that as Auburn women, we're called to mutual respectfulness and helpfulness and happiness for all. And like you should have the respect for your coworkers to go to them before you get anybody else. Easy. It is so easy to avoid that. It is so easy to run down the hallway to a friend that you're working with and say, can you believe so-and-so did this? But at the same time too, I was reading a book by Brene Brown, and she said the most unkind thing you can do for somebody is not give them feedback. And part of that feedback is like, hey, this happened and it really bothered me, or hey, when you do this, it affects my process and I can't do why. And I think that gives them room to grow. And it gives you the confidence to walk in and step into those hard situations that a lot of people are really scared to do. A lot of people do not like conflict, and I will say I'm a proponent of healthy conflict. Like let's do it in a really good manner. And I think that kind of ties into my second thing is, okay, let's say that you do confront somebody. How do you do it? And that is so important. I mean, if you can't do it well, it's not worth doing. Because when you burn somebody or hurt somebody's feelings or damage their pride, or maybe say their work isn't great, that sticks with somebody. And something else I've learned is that really sticks with somebody. And when you're working with people for 3, 4, 5 years, you build a relationship, and you don't want your relationship to be built on that. And so I always kind of think back to like Dale Carnegie's book, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of his biggest points is to never hurt anybody's pride. And so let's say I have a coworker that never gets anything on time, instead of being like, hey, I told you I needed this then and you still haven't sent it to me. That's a very different approach than, hey, have you had a chance to do blah, blah? I know you're super busy, but if you had a chance, well, in that moment, they know they haven't done it, but you give them the grace and the space and the freedom to acknowledge that for themselves. And hopefully that spurs them on to be better. And you've built that relationship. You've given a positive little nugget to that relationship instead of a negative one. And so I think it's all about the approach. And I also think too, the golden rules, treat others how you want to be treated. If you're overwhelmed, like you want somebody to show you some grace, not come in and bark at you because you hadn't done something that you were supposed to do. Because we all fail in our jobs. We are all not perfect. And there's seasons that we're killing it and there's seasons that we're not, because life happens, personal stuff happens. And you want that support when your life is hectic, so you need to give it to others. So I think people's the biggest one, but don't be afraid of conflict, but also, like, I think there's, like Olivia said earlier, there's a strength in your grace. And to step into that with confidence. And like I said earlier, it's not about making statements, it's about asking questions. And so I think that's really true when you're working with colleagues as well.
That is wonderful advice, Jacqueline. And I think just that open line of communication is always so helpful in the workplace. So thank you for sharing that with us. One final question for the panel that I kind of want to reflect on is, how do you hope to lead the next generation of young women as they enter the workplace? And I will kick it over to Rodnicia.
Yeah, well, Caroline, this is something I'm really passionate about. So for me, it's about showing up as myself, about leading through example. You guys know that I feel like if other women can see it, then they can really feel like they can achieve your success. I've worked throughout my career in a male-dominated industry. STEM has making a lot of strides, but I'm still lacking in the number of women and the number of minorities in that workplace. And so for me, I think leading is just really about setting that example and being able to help other people by, speaking on panels, by giving mentorship, by sending an email or networking. A lot of where I have been able to mature has been through the advice and wise counsel of other leaders. Peer mentors are really big for me, and I call peer mentors people who are in the same kind of age range, who are killing it in their own industries and whatever advice that they have. So being able to listen to those wise counsel women and those leaders as just inspiration for myself. And that, I think, helps me show up for others. But again, I wouldn't underestimate my personal authenticity and drive. I believe in hard work. And that in itself speaks volumes, because you never, ever know who's watching you, who you are inspiring, whether that is on social media, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's in your community. Some of the other women said it, your brand is very, very powerful. And you don't have to be on in the White House to be an inspiration to young women or to young girls coming up. Who you are and where you are, how you show up at church, at work, at the gym, all of these different places is an inspiration for the next generation. And so, yeah, I want to do great things. I want to change the world, but I also want to change the world in my own sphere of influence. And for me, that is just by being an example and showing up in a very positive light. And so that, I think, speaks volumes and sometimes can be underestimated, because we want the biggest trophies. And sometimes it's the small wins that actually makes the greatest stride. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Rodnicia. Natalie?
Yeah, great points. I won't try to echo everything you said. I was on listening to another panel from this weekend. They say you have to hear something 7 times to really remember it. So I think it's good that some of us have a lot of the same points and thoughts. For me, I try to show up as a servant leader. And even though I'm not like in a high position, I'm not a leader of the company, so to speak, but I think we all have certain qualities. And so I try to show up as a servant leader, kind of helping others. I know early on in my career, I made the advances that I have because someone saw something in me that I maybe didn't see in myself and took a chance on me. And so I strive to do that for other people. As Rodnicia mentioned, like peer mentoring is super important. When I started at the company, there was a young woman who had met my sister at some other event. Some of you know I have a twin sister who also went to Auburn. And she was like, hey, I met your sister. She said you worked at Cox and I needed to meet you. It was like an internship field day or something. And she just reached out. She embraced me. She helped introduce me to different people at the company, different leaders, different people who were interested in things that I was interested in. And that was really helpful and super beneficial for me starting out at a new company. So I hope to do that for someone else. And just to kind of tie it into our Auburn creed, one of the lines, I believe in human touch, which cultivates the sympathy with my fellow men and mutual helpfulness. Like I want to strive to be that and do that as well. So that would be my advice.
That was so wonderfully said. Thank you, Natalie. Olivia?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know that I could honestly say anything other than what Rodnizia and Natalie have both touched on. I mean, they're both so eloquent in what they've said so far. I just want to, I think, reinforce the sentiment that Rodnizia kind of touched on a little bit, but just that you recognize that where you are is your platform. And so she mentioned, you don't have to be in the White House to be making a difference. You are in your community, you are in your specific season, you are in your job role, your position, you're in your church group, you're in, whatever role you're in, whether it's one throughout the day or it's 87 different roles that you take on throughout the day. Each one is your platform. And I mentioned it earlier, just that you are your brand, your own brand, and everything that you do is a reflection on that. And you are the one in control of that. So you are the one in control of how you show up, how you execute every task or opportunity that goes with that role that you've taken on at that time. And I was just, talking with a friend yesterday about she's contemplating moving to a different city, and she was so nervous because she was like, well, I have my ministry set up here and I don't know if I can do ministry in another city, and she was trying to weigh that balance. And I think it was important for her to be reminded that wherever you are, like Jacqueline said earlier, you can bloom where you're planted. There is always an opportunity to reach somebody, to make an impact on their life, to make a difference in a community. It does not have to be this large, grandiose style, gesture. Maybe it is. Maybe you really are running an organization. Maybe you are a CEO of a hospital or a big corporation, and every decision that you make impacts thousands of people. But maybe you're not. Maybe you are, a part-time tour guide, and literally the only people you're going to touch that day are tourists from around the world. But every word that comes out of your mouth, every step that you take, every interaction you have throughout the day is leaving an impact. And so, just as Natalie mentioned the creed, always just kind of keeping that in your back pocket. Like I said, we are fortunate to have Auburn in our back pocket. I mean, it's really a privilege that a lot of people don't have. And there's so much more than just our diploma that we walk away from Auburn with. And so keeping that in the back of your mind always with everything that you do is really, really going to set you up, not just for success in your career path, but just success in life. Be kind, to everyone, and you will do amazing, amazing things.
Thank you, Olivia. Jacqueline?
Hey guys, I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I know that you need either lunch or coffee. But when I think about leading a future generation of women, I think of creating women who are wells, who are full of life and full of truth and full of grace and confidence, that are brilliant, but that are women that wherever they go, they're filling somebody else's bucket up. And whether that's at work, whether that's at home, whatever it is. And within that, I think that gives us the ability to defy cultural norms. And I mean that in the progressive sense, but also in the regressive sense as well. Like, women were thought of in the kitchen. Well, one of my favorite things to do at work is to bring baked goods because it's a unifier, and I love celebrating people's birthdays personally and professionally. And I bake a cake. Well, that could be looked at as women back in the kitchen, but I'm not defined by societal norms on that way or to do things that are crazy. I mean, when I ran for SJ president, there had been 2 females before me. But it was because I had always baked people cookies and taken care of them and known their birthdays. They said, I'm going to support you. And so, we talk about defining cultural norms, which is awesome, but also to who are we, like Ramisha said, be true to who you are. And I'm a baker and I love that. And so just creating a culture and being an example to women, which I think is the hardest thing because you have to look and reflect on your own life of where you have faults and really refine those. But like I said, I really would love to have a generation of women who are wells for the world. Yeah.
That is so wonderful. Thank you, Jacqueline. And last but not least, Jen.
Yes, I'll try to keep it very short. So everyone kind of touched on leading by example, and I think that really sums it up. You should walk the walk, lead in a way that you would want to be led. But then just to kind of add a little bit of a new point, I also would like to lead through empowerment. I think letting other people's successes shine is the way to go. It doesn't take away from what I've done and what I've accomplished. So I want to bring other women alongside me. Like we've been chatting, just the women between us on this panel. It's so cool to hear what everyone's doing. And I'm so proud of everyone. And that doesn't take away from what I've done too. So just empower the people around you. And Auburn women are awesome. So let's show everyone.
You are so right about that, Jen. And as we close out this session, I do just want to thank you all for being such inspirational women. And I feel so lucky to know all of you and work on the Young Alumni Council with you. So thank you for all your hard work on the Young Alumni Council. And thank you, Jacqueline, Rodneycia, Jennifer, Natalie, and Olivia for sharing your experiences with us and for the wonderful insight, and many thanks to each of you who joined us for this very important session. Our next session will begin a few minutes after 11 and will focus on leading from day one. Also, I know that some colleges and schools will be hosting some individual engagements during that time. So please know the next session will be recorded, and we'll see you all there.